We should be saving more of our own seeds. It's another step on the ladder of self-sufficiency, and of course it saves on the costs of growing our own. So it's pruners, envelopes and seed boxes at the ready, because it's time to harvest some seeds. And where better to begin than the easiest seeds to save, peas and beans. And yes, we've leapt back to last season's beans to bag ourselves some ripe and ready ones, the magic of video editing. Beans and peas are so satisfying to save seed from because you can literally see the seed swelling within the pod, and then when they are ready they will turn this kind of straw brown colour and go sort of crisp to the touch. Now of course, don't save seeds early on in the season, because the more you pick the beans, the more they will come, and you want to enjoy as big a crop as possible. So wait until the end of the season, once they begin to slow down, and then leave the final few pods to ripen. Now these are straw to the colour, and they are kind of rattling in there. It's been very, very wet, so I need to get these in, I think, because it's not going to get any drier and they can finish off drying inside. Can you hear that? Rattling nicely. As I said, it has been very wet and some of the pods have got this kind of speckling on the outside because of that, which is why I decided to gather them in, because they are kind of ready. Now as you go through, just inspect each bean and check they're all nice and healthy and firm, and discard any that are very, very small or gone a bit soft or perhaps diseased themselves or damaged in any way, because you've got a lot here and you want to save the best. By the way, if you're growing fava or broad beans, well, these will readily cross-pollinate between varieties, which means that if you are growing more than one variety, then you may not get what you're expecting from those seeds. However, if you're just growing one variety like most gardeners, you should be fine. You know, beans are absolutely the most satisfying things to save seed from. They almost look like little embryos with the sort of veins going through them. They're kind of beautiful, don't you think? Once you're done shelling, you will need to continue them drying to make sure they're ready for storing. And to do that, just spread them out onto some newspaper onto a warm indoor windowsill. And they should take around 1 to 2 weeks maximum to finish drying. The beans are now dried and they're going into a paper envelope which is fairly breathable, and I've put both the variety name and the date of harvest on the front so I know how old these seeds will be, and these will go into my seed store and I will talk more about that later on in the video. Peppers and tomatoes, which we'll be looking at in a minute, are really handy for saving seeds because the seeds are ready at the same time as the fruit itself is ripe for eating, removing any guesswork. Like all the vegetables we're saving seeds from today, I'm only saving seeds from open pollinated, not hybrid varieties. That's because hybrids are produced from two parent plants that are crossed, two parent varieties. So by saving the seed from their offspring, we might get a seed that goes back to one of the parents or an unpredictable mix of the two. So open pollinated varieties avoids that kind of risk. So really it's very simple. Just slice your pepper open like you normally would, and then you can just remove the seeds here, pick them away from the pith, and then spread them out to dry. Now both sweet peppers and chili peppers will readily cross-pollinate. So if you're growing more than one variety, you might want to grow them quite far apart so that you get just what you're after and don't get any unpredictable results. And here they are, a few weeks on, now nicely dried, and you can see that they're beautifully loose and they're kind of like almost rattly, not a technical term, but there you go, beautiful and ready to store. So I'm going to store them in just the same way as I did with my beans, in a paper envelope with the name, variety and the date. If you have very small or especially long and thin chili peppers, then it may be easier to dry them first. Either just string them up and let them air dry, or pop them into a dehydrator and then just twizzle them between your finger and thumbs to release the seeds once they're dry. And then of course the flesh of the chilies can go into a jar to store when a hit of heat is needed, or ground up to make your own chili powder. Tomatoes self-pollinate rather than cross-pollinate, which means they're highly likely to give seeds that are true to type. Now I've got some lovely ripe tomatoes here. There's one there, and it's important we harvest our tomatoes at peak ripeness when we're looking to save seeds from them. To clean the seeds from the tomato, I'm going to ferment them. Now, the pulp around the seeds can inhibit germination, and it also can sometimes act as a bit of a vehicle for seed-borne diseases, so it's best to remove it if we can. Fermenting can seem like a bit of a technical thing, quite scary, but really it's very simple. I'm just going to scrape out the pulp here, pop it into a glass of water, and then pop that on a warm windowsill for somewhere between 4 and 7 days to ferment. Give them a little stir every couple of days, and that will help the seeds kind of separate from the pulp. Now here is one that's been fermenting for about 4 days now, and you can see that the seeds have sunk to the bottom and most of the pith and a little bit of scum is on top, and that's absolutely perfect. We can now pour off the pulp and scummy water to leave our lovely clean seeds. There we are, they're all nice and clean and washed off. So I'm just going to dry them off now at room temperature in an airy place, separating out the seeds to get them all nice and evenly dry. Then once they are fully dried, I'll again put them into my labelled envelopes. Now some people don't bother with this fermentation process, and I'd say it's not 100% necessary, but it does improve your chances of germination and leave super clean seeds. So I'd say it's only a small step, so why not do it? Squash and pumpkins readily cross-pollinate, while if the pollen from a cucumber flower lands on a squash flower, it can make the fruit completely seedless, and obviously if we're trying to save seeds, we don't want that. Now if you're growing one variety of squash or pumpkins, then, well, you can just grow on and grow the fruit and then harvest the seeds from that. If you've got multiple varieties growing close by, then don't try and isolate individual plants, isolate the flowers instead. Now the first job is to identify the females, because we don't want those getting pollinated just yet. And they are the ones with the slight swelling behind the flower. Get them while they're young, before they've opened, and then pop over a muslin or organza bag like this, just over the top of it like that to keep the bees out, and just secure it round it like that. Now that'll stay in place until the flower starts to crack open. There's a flower here that's ready to go. The leaves have, or rather the petals have started to unfurl. So I'm gonna go and grab a male flower. I can just see one here. The next job is to peel back the petals so we can see what we're dealing with here. And here now you can see the exposed stamen of the male flower, and I'm just gonna gently brush it against the style here of the female flower. And now with that done, I can put my bag back on and then leave it to start swelling. Once the flower's dropped off, there's no more risk of it getting pollinated by different flowers, so you can remove any bag. But to make sure you identify the right fruit for harvesting to harvest your seeds, just tie a little bit of ribbon or something similar onto the stalk behind the fruit for easy identification. Squash seeds are simplicity themselves to harvest. Just scoop them out with a spoon and harvest the seeds, I'd say 3 weeks after you've picked the fruits. That'll just give the seeds a little bit of extra time to finish ripening inside the fruit. Then once you've done all that, blast off any pulp or pith from the seeds and then lay them out as before onto a plate or piece of toweling or whatever, and keep them drying in a lovely warm place, and just agitate the seeds every now and then, flip them over to ensure a nice even dry, and then store once again in labelled paper envelopes. As an aside, I wanted to show you this cucumber here. This is what a ripe and ready cucumber looks like when you're wanting to save your own seed. It's gone yellow, and if I give it a little squish, it's quite soft to the touch. Now this here is an all-female variety of cucumber which doesn't produce viable seeds, so I won't actually be saving them. However, if you've got a normal variety of cucumber, this is what you're looking for. Many common vegetables are biennials, which means they flower and set seed in their second summer of life. Now this includes many common vegetables like carrots, beets or beetroot, lettuce, chard, as well as alliums like leeks and shallots. So if you want to harvest seeds from these guys, just leave several plants to grow on into their second summer so you can then get them to flower and set those seeds. Brassicas are also biennials, but they are incredibly promiscuous, readily cross-pollinating with each other, so I would say they're not really worth saving seeds from, especially as the seeds of these guys usually are very cheap. Now for those vegetables that you are overwintering to get them to grow into their second year, if your winters are cold, just mulch around them to keep them nice and snug until growth resumes again in spring. Plants in the allium family, that's onions, shallots and leeks, and these here are actually perennial leeks. These flowers cross-pollinate between actual blooms, so you'll need to overwinter several plants to ensure a good genetic mix to get that viable seed. The bonus is that the flowers are absolutely stunning and a real boon for the bees too. Once the seeds have dried up in the seed pods, just harvest them, dry them off for another week or so, and then just vigorously shake out the little black seeds for storing. Here I've got a couple of lettuce plants which I'm letting bolt and flower and eventually set seed. Now lettuces produce seeds in absolute profusion, and they're like little fluffy dandelion seeds, very pretty. Now once they're completely formed, I'm going to pull them up, hang them up to finish drying, and then rub the seed heads between my hands to separate out the seeds from the plants there. And I'll then blow across them to remove any chaff before storing them in my labelled envelopes. Now seeds are still living beings, and by storing them in these paper envelopes we can ensure good airflow still can continue. Now I like to keep them in a lidded container along with a couple of packets of silica gel which act as desiccants to keep the air nice and dry. Now what container you use does matter. It's been scientifically proven that glass or metal containers like this are best, plastic containers less so. If you want to keep your seeds to enjoy next season, then store them in a cool, dark, dry environment. A room would be fine. But even better, to make them last even longer, keep them in a refrigerator or a freezer. The important thing is to avoid whip-sawing temperatures. Seeds should last for at least one season and potentially more, so long as they're kept in a cool, dark and steady environment. Well, it's great to be saving some of these seeds, and I hope you're inspired to do the same too. I'll catch you next time.